couple things. Rick will talk. I'll introduce him. Coach Hudson will talk. Then we'll have questions. For practice today, nothing really changes. Practice will be open 3 o'clock today out of the Westfield practice facility. We do ask that if you have questions, please raise your hand so we can bring a microphone around to you. Now I'd like to introduce the Director of Athletics at Tulane University, Rick Dixon.
Hey, good morning. Not easy days or easy decisions, but as you know, by now we've selected to make a change in direction, and that's why we're here this morning. Bob Toledo has resigned effective as of this morning after he and I met for some time. As you know, Bob inherited the task of rebuilding this program 4.5 years ago in light of our situation in terms of rebuilding really the entire program and university after Katrina. Appreciate greatly and respect the job that Bob and his staff have done in those efforts. We're in a better place today because of those efforts. Mark Hudson, who is our co-offensive coordinator, and as of 8:30 this morning, has answered my request to become our interim head coach for the balance of this remaining 6 games in this season. I've known Mark for almost 20 years, known of him for longer than that, and I'm very confident in how he'll handle his responsibilities. The staff, to a person that I met with this morning, has reinforced to me their full and unconditional commitment to help shepherd our program through these next 6 weeks. I'm confident in that and those abilities as well. Subsequent to that, I then met with our student athletes this morning and informed them of the news. Coach Toledo joined me in that discussion, and at the end basically got the same response, because I asked to a person to not recommit themselves unless they were truly and unconditionally committed to moving forward as one. And so that's been the focus of the morning, and we're wrapping that up by bringing this news to you. Today our goal is twofold. My expectation that I communicated to our staff and to our players today is really this. First and foremost, come together as a family that first will stand up and continue to compete and give their greatest effort towards doing so. And I ask the same both of every assistant coach, of Mark, and every one of our young men in the football program, to a person. And the answer has been affirmative. Second, I would say to everyone out there that has interest in terms of supporting these coaches and these young men towards that effort, I say to do so. It's time to stand up and do so unconditionally. As we all know, over the last weeks and days, Bob had become a lightning rod for criticism and attacks and things that shouldn't be part of what we're doing in college athletics. And as I told the young men, and Bob agreed, by him stepping down, that is removed. And so it's time to come together, and it's time to focus forward. And for those out there that have an interest in Tulane and in Tulane athletics, I would tell you it's time to do that now. Put everything else aside and come together in joining us to support these coaches and young men in going forward. We have already begun the process of what will be a national search. Make no mistake, we have to find the right fit. We understand that. As you heard us outline last spring, our mission is to compete as we outlined to you last spring. And we believe we've put layers and steps in place to position us to do so. Yet at the same time, we've also come to realize that it's time to reboot ourselves and move ourselves forward in a positive direction. As we also outlined last spring, we made it very direct and very public about our intent and our efforts. We understand it's a process. We've been through a year-long process or more of reviewing every aspect of our program to allow it to achieve the goals that we've set for it. We'll continue through that process. We've begun the process of committing greater resources in all aspects of that program, and these coaches know, these kids know, and as I said to them this morning, it wasn't always this way, where we had year-round programs and dedicated strength coaches and trainers and academic counselors specific to just this program. And that's just the start of it. As you know, we'll continue to actively plan and develop the resources to have our own home for this program. We understand the importance of it, and I would say to you that's a goal we'll achieve. But it doesn't stop there. And so the fruits or the outcome of these searches will basically outline that we will work step by step with whoever is selected to reach those desired goals and outcomes. Okay, so I think after I introduce Mark, we'll both be here for some questions, but I'd like to introduce to you someone, as I said, that I've known over the last 20 years in this program, and he was there at the beginning of the rebuilding. And although I think there are many within that staff that are qualified or have had coaching experience or different ones, I think the fact Mark's been there from the beginning. He's also been in this role before of having served as an interim coach and done so successfully. He has great respect both in the coaching staff room but also in the locker room. So going forward today, this is our new football coach.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Rick. Rick gave you the time frame. It has been an eventful morning. First off, we'd like to thank Rick and Scott for entrusting me in a position to be the leader of this team and this staff and to move this program forward, to bring the team together, to bring the staff together as one and move forward. I think, as Rick had mentioned, this is my second time around as an interim. I told Roger this will be the second trip to Hawaii as an interim in working with that. It has been a whirlwind this morning. This day is less than 4 hours into it. I have met with a number of people, a number of players, and with the staff. Rick and I addressed the majority of the team today in a team meeting. We discussed the situation with Bob. Bob has many outstanding qualities. He brought me to this institution, selected me. I selected to be here. The majority of the players, in fact all of them, he brought here. So we wish Bob nothing but the best, and him and Laney both, throughout their career and the rest of their time period in working with it. In talking to the players and talking to the staff, we have half a season left. We have played 3 conference games. There's 6 ball games remaining. Our goals are still intact. Our focus, our commitment is to beat Memphis, the best preparation as a player and as a coach. We have good student athletes. They're good players, they're good people. In times of turmoil, in times of disarray, they have to come together right here. And for the most part, young adults are resilient. Look for them to come together and to work. Met with the staff. Rick addressed that. There was a number of qualified candidates. Someone had to be chosen. I told them, if it had been them, I would wholeheartedly support them. I told them I was the one chosen. Asked for their support, and to a man, they offered that support in working with that. Meeting with the players, told them the story. Every staff member in this room chose to be here at Tulane. They chose to be here at Tulane. And with that, this is our university, this is their university, and we need to come together, one mind, one heartbeat, as one, and move forward in working with that. There's going to be a lot of questions from administration. There's going to be a lot of questions from media. There's going to be questions from players and staff members in working to it. It has been a quick time frame. We'll address Memphis. We'll address philosophy. We'll address how we're going through and our involvement with the remainder of the season at a later date. Roger will set that up with you. But as for right now, the staff will stay intact. The assignments, Steve will be our defensive coordinator. John will be our special teams coordinator. Greg Davis will take a more active role. He will be our play caller and assume the offensive coordinating positions there. We'll still handle the run game coordinating in that, and I will take a more active role in being the head coach and covering all 3 phases of the program. We have a players meeting at 1:15. All the players will be there. Practice will go on as usual. Roger said it. Our practice will be open. The media will be invited out there today, and we'll answer questions to the best of my knowledge in working with that. Okay? I think every assistant coach, if they're worthy, aspires to be the head coach. And certainly I'm no different. I've dreamed of being in that chair. I've dreamed of being in position in front of you today, addressing the team and working with that. I've had a lot of great mentors over the past, from Houston Nutt, Danny Ford, Jack Crow, Barry Switzer, Jim Donnan. It can go on. Larry Coker, Jimmy Johnson, and have learned from each one of them. But the thing I learned from them is you have to be yourself. You can't be someone else, okay? So as we get to know each other, as time goes on, we'll try to present that to you, and we'll try to present that to the team, and we'll try to present that to the staff. Thank you.
You guys just want to stand up there, we'll take questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question.
Rick, with push to get the stadium going, and obviously going the 15-40 of Coach Toledo, is it fair to say that this is potentially the most important hire you've made since you arrived here almost a decade ago?
Well, they're all important, Fletcher. They, certainly they're important in the light of what I believe my responsibility is to, in all phases, not just wins and losses, but hire the type of people that play very critical roles in the lives and experiences of our student athletes. So certainly this is an important one because the program's an important one to us, and it's at an important time in the history of this program. I think all of you know that irrespective of today, we've been very direct about saying that it's time to move this program to a point and place that it's really struggled to find over 6 decades. So we know that's not an overnight situation, but again, we said competitive and consistency, and those things don't happen overnight, but we know the necessary steps, the necessary tools, resources that are needed to do so. So that effort will continue in all aspects of it. Certainly personnel and the hiring is part of it as well.
Greg, with regard to the hiring process, you plan on enlisting a national service to help with this process, committee, or how are you going to go about hiring?
Yeah, we'll follow that same script that we had previously where we've done that. And, I've already started those wheels in motions this morning. So that, adds a second priority for me right now beyond the continued activities towards making this stadium a realization. Certainly in front of that for the short term will be, making certain that we do as thorough and diligent a job as possible in identifying those prospects out there.
Coach, what makes you feel Tulane can turn it around? You've been here with Bob, and you see the good things and the bad things. What makes you feel? You've been around a while.
I have been. I've been a part of programs that did turn around, certainly with Houston Nutt in the earlier years with him, from Murray State, Boise State to Arkansas. I think it's the eternal optimist. I think that's one of the reasons I'm into coaching. I think we can make a difference in young men's lives, not only in the football, but after, when their careers are done. Certainly it's going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to take a united front. I mentioned that earlier. The things that we can control is our attitude and our effort as players and coaches. And was big emphasis today in the team meeting, and it will be another emphasis today. We must come together in that effort and turn the program around. And we have the 6 remaining games. It starts with Memphis this week, and we'll do everything within our power as coaches, as players, to work toward that.
What was the tipping point here? Was it the lack of competitiveness, or was it, you mentioned, the lightning rod effect that Toledo was having, and, I was just curious, what was sort of the final straw?
I don't know that he was having it, but he was certainly the target of it. Ultimately, and we'd started this, as Mark knows, some weeks ago, I think when we returned from maybe West Point, that I came in and addressed the staff and the team. And, in times like this, and, you're looking at a group that's probably faced more adversity than any group like us you could face in the country. And I've just learned through experiences, look, you can't get blindsided or taken out or distracted by the negativity and the noise, as I refer to it. And for a couple-week period there, and I think certainly in light of the fact of how they went out and competed in the week of Syracuse, we kind of felt like we had cleared the room a little bit, or cleared the air, because it was toxic to the point that it made it very difficult. Or as Bob said to me this morning, it's not good conditions, working conditions for he or the players. And so I think the accumulation of that, over time, we again had kind of made a temporary stopgap in it there for a couple weeks. But with last Saturday's performance and facing another home game this weekend, it had ratcheted right back up to the point that's not what we're really aspiring to do. It's created such a negative, toxic situation that coaches, student athletes, et cetera, can't reach the goals that we bring them in here for. And ultimately, it's, you have to constantly monitor those things and assess. And so it was an accumulation. We thought we had intervened and stopped it a couple weeks ago. And then after Saturday, we saw it reappear. And ultimately, that's not healthy for anybody involved, including Bob.
Can you characterize the type of coach you are looking for? A list of qualities that, and does age have anything to do with it?
Does age?
Yeah, does age on
I probably won't call Joe Paterno, but as we've seen, and Bob was included in that category too, there's coaches of all ages that have achieved high levels of success. I think aptitude, experience, can come in a lot of different shapes, sizes, and ages. Certainly here, at Tulane, we look for somebody that first embraces Tulane, embraces New Orleans. Those things are important because we are what we are and we are where we are. So somebody that looks at both of those things as both unique and positive is important. Somebody that's demonstrated, the capability in whatever role capacities they've been, to contribute to and lead at high levels of success. Whether, I'm not going to arbitrarily rule out what that means in terms of titles, those things, but I think it's a collection of experiences and attributes that kind of revolve around all those characteristics.
Forget to, the first one is, when you say we are what we are, I know that it's well documented that Bob was one of the lower paid coaches in Conference USA, where if you look at somebody like June Jones, I know SMU made about a $2 million annual commitment to him. What is the commitment financially, I guess, that the university may be willing to go to get the next head coach?
In regards to personnel?
Yeah, as the head coach, as
Yeah.
far as, I guess, paying the
I mean,
next head coach.
I would say this without specifying any numbers or range. Don't know that in either instance, head coach or the assistant staff pool, that would necessarily be the highest in the country or conference. I do strongly believe that we'll be allowed to be very competitive in both at a different level than we have currently and more recently.
And usually assistant coaches or head coaches are playing right now. Could you see a situation if there's a coach out there where this hire is made before the college season ends, if a coach is out there and available right now, instead of waiting till the end of the season, if it's the right guy?
As far as making a selection?
Yeah, I mean, obviously names are surfacing, Rich Rodriguez and people like that. If the coach
Yeah, if
is out
someone
there,
is
would you make that hire before the season ends?
outside the industry, or not actively in the industry right now, I mean, certainly that'll avail both them and myself opportunities to have discussions that you might not would otherwise. And so if we find candidates in that category, I'm sure we'll have those conversations. Nothing's going to change here over the next 6 weeks. Mark Hudson will lead our program, our coaches, and our student athletes. But as far as the time frame, I mean, I can tell you it would pretty much cover the waterfront in terms of possibilities. We wouldn't rule out any of those, or certainly any of the former that might be still actively engaged.
Rick, you talked about moving the national search. You've done it before, you seem like that method of one of finding a new head coach. At the end of the day, you have to make the final call for this hire. You look at your last 2 big hires in Toledo, obviously Jacobson, those two guys were not successful.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, how much do you have to kind of do a self-evaluation any coach, but
Sure.
specifically your two main sports, football and basketball. Those self-evaluation of how how the person.
That process.
Yeah, the process.
Yeah, and I think we've tweaked some of that along the way, with engaging, I think in the last couple, so a third-party service in doing it, not so much obviously to make the hires, but where they best are helpful is in being able to actively have discussions that aren't appropriate for us at this time. And so I think, we certainly did that in the last basketball hire with Ed Conroy. And, we found it beneficial in that regard, and we're comfortable going down that same path.
I mean, we started to talk. Do you feel pressure to get this right?
Well, you always do, whether I'm hiring the bowling coach or the soccer, or not, I guess I wouldn't be hiring the soccer coach, but, any of these positions, it's important. And football's, as we've stated publicly, football's a very critical and important piece of our overall enterprise here. And, it's struggled for decades in determining, what that right fit and hire, and maybe at the times that there was a right fit and hire, it wasn't able to be sustained, et cetera. So, it goes beyond me. Collectively, it's important on a lot of fronts.
Regarding the national coaching search, how do you personally rate Tulane's attractiveness as far as attracting new coaches?
There's the obvious piece that people, coaches would look at and say, those that have struggled. And then they quickly look to, because as you heard Mark say, coaches by nature are eternal optimists, and look to those that have succeeded. There's been fewer of those than the ones that have struggled. So you look at, the overall picture and kind of framework of where the area is, what the university is itself, first and foremost, and as you all know, that's a real asset for us in everything we do. To what the resources are, what the capabilities are, and then it goes down layers below that to facilities and budgets and things of that nature. And those are the, I would tell you, we're in an upward trend in all of those for us in our cycle. Again, the eternal optimist has to ferret out and decide, within those capabilities, what can be different now than was before. So I think just from a, trend or direction and those things, we believe, and we have believed for some time that it's moving forward. It'll be the first time in the last 6 years that I've hired any coach that I could look them in the eye and say, yeah, you're coming to a full comprehensive athletic program. Couldn't say that the last 6 years to anybody in any sport. That's different today. And yes, we have made a major commitment to our resources development, to providing the necessary facilities to recruit and develop young men and women. And that will continue, and we have evidence of it, and we'll continue evidence of it. So, it's not just words, it's obviously evidence and things that they can tangibly see and evaluate for themselves.
Can you maybe just talk about the pros and cons of, I guess, an assistant coach that's never been a head coach versus someone with a proven track record? I know Bob has been a head coach, Ed Conroy has been a head coach. Do you lean more one way than the other? Someone who hasn't been a head coach versus someone that does have head coach?
I think it factors in at some point. It's one of the factors that plays in the overall evaluation. But as we all know, including right here, there's been some very successful assistant coaches that have come in and done well as well, and as well as head coaches that haven't done well. So it's, it can't be the only factor by any means, but it's something in the process that you have to evaluate.
Coach Hudson, were you surprised this morning? I mean, was this a shock to you? Were you coming in as an assistant coach and you found out you might be the interim head coach, or did you have any inkling?
No, it was a surprise this morning to the whole staff. Bob came in as usual in the morning and then told us he had a meeting with Rick 7:15, and then after their discussions, Rick came down and informed the staff with Bob in there of the news. But no, Tammy, I did not have any idea.
decide to keep Coach Lee for the fifth season. Is this kind of a worst case scenario that you could come off with this and bring him back for a fifth season, and then you had all his recruits finally there? Is this kind of the point where it just wasn't better for him?
Well, we said, I mean, a couple things. If you go back to, at the time, shortly after the season, when we said, you know, we were retaining Bob to do so, and one of the things I stated was, look, from where we started, you know, to where we were, we now believe we're at the time where a real-time snapshot can be taken, and that real measurable goals should be applied. And so that's kind of the sequence that we followed in it. But again, you know, look back to that time. I think I said the most critical piece of this was the priority of, I think Mark certainly recalls this time, but in '07, I believe our signing class was 12, maybe 13 student athletes, 10 of which were previously committed to the previous staff this group honored. So there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2, 3 to 5 in addition. So in effect, their first real recruiting class became '08, '09, '10, and this year's class. And it was very critical for this program to have continuity. As all of you in here well know, we load from the bottom, not from the side. And we don't, if there's a hole or replacement or a medical disqualification or whatever it may be, that comes from underneath. So to have 4 layers of that consecutively was critical for our program, which had nothing to do with personnel. And we seemed to be into a cycle, especially with this last class, that each year we were getting progressively better, progressively greater inroads in the state, and some continuity there. Redshirting was taking place on about a 50% level of each class, so we were building in layers, but also depth within those layers. Those are all things, as you know, that historically we haven't had. The few times in our history that we have, coupled with good coaching, good support, good resources, et cetera, you've seen some intermittent successes. If you look back at the '97, '98 year, there seemed to have been coming off a 4 or 5 year cycle of a previous regime that was layered right, given the ability to develop and mature, and then certainly coached well. And so that's kind of the sequence of things that tie back to your question.
Rick, I know you said you're using National Career Service. What input does President Cowan have in this upcoming future coaching hire?
What piece?
President Cowan, what is his part in this coaching search? When is he coming to you? Do you get any input from President Cowan at all?
Oh, I get input, for sure. And like he has in many of our searches, you know, will be, certainly as we get into the final stages and bring candidates to campus, he and others, you know, will participate. It's none of these things that you can imagine with any university are ever one-person decisions. So certainly he'll have, you know, significant input at the point that we've filtered through a number of candidates and interviews and come back to what we think is the right collection to choose from.
What have you learned in 6 years as AD, as far as football goes?
In the last,
You know,
the last 6
you
years,
made a hire,
60 or
brought
the
in-
6?
Brought in Toledo.
Yeah, well,
What have-
I've learned, Peter, that it's in any situation where you absolutely, I mean, people talk about building programs, but for us, that's a totally different definition here. And again, you know, people say we bring up excuses. No, I don't. All I have to do is recite the facts of where we started. And I do think it's important, and I think Bob and his staff were following the script, one of establishing a local and regional and statewide recruiting base. And this staff had both initiated, because it had been some time since we'd had that type of relationship, and it doesn't come easy. One thing I've learned in Louisiana, things don't come easy. So you have to first build the relationships, build the bridges, and in turn, at some point you start to reap the benefits. It appears that our last 3 recruiting classes have been relatively solid, improved each year. It appears that we have, with the 10 commitments that I believe are in place today, are continuing that trend. And a lot of it's a reflection of building those bridges and relationships, starting from inside New Orleans and throughout. It also, for us, extends to some other markets where Tulane has some good recognition, as a university, whether that's prep schools in the Northeast or others. And, a university like this, if it's worked that direction, will always probably have some national appeal on that regard. Ultimately, though, you have to be strong working from inside out, and I think that's an important piece, has been, and I think will continue to be.
What's the big thing that has to be done?
To get it over the hump? Peter, I would say that that's part of it, because coaching and player personnel always factor in. At the same time, and I think it ties back to some of what you've seen in our history, and go back to, I believe it's 36, 37 years ago, when at that time, we're getting pretty good on the remembering the times and so forth, but that's when, interestingly, we had right outside our doors the largest professional or college venues football stadium in the South. We just didn't have a stadium. We had the largest professional or college venue in the South, right outside our doors. So there was a huge signal or symbol of what football meant here, and that went away. And over the decades, so did a lot of our recognition and relevance in college football. Again, with the noted exceptions that we all know about. So I think first and foremost is building a foundation under this program that allows it to operate at a different level than it's ever been in recent times and modern times, for sure.
Was Bob felt this was the thing to do, right time?
He did.
From the Bob.
We talk every week. I mean, most of my fall has been a combination of, in fact, this I think is the first, I see Travis in here, he's pretty much controlled my schedule for the last several months, and I would always end up, whether it was at home I'll take it, Peter, if you want me to, for the last several months in regards to this, finding the resources for our stadium. And but I would always make a point, I'm here Mondays generally to meet with our staff and all the different units and coaches. And then usually Tuesday through about Friday, Travis and I are on the road somewhere. And then I end up either where our team is on the road or at home for the home games. And so we talk throughout, as we always have. And as we visit with each other this morning. In fact, I was last in his office Sunday, as I usually am every Sunday, just kind of wrapping up with each other about what just occurred and what we've seen. And I think the one thing we both agreed on is, look, what's going on now is, Peter, it may be a stadium sponsor for me. Listen, I've answered every phone call just in case it might be. But we both agreed that it wasn't, not only for our program and the coaches and kids involved, but even for him personally. Things had unfortunately in times like this, I don't know if it's human nature or what, people like to pile on and do things. And look, when at the end, I'm responsible for a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds. And I take that part really serious, and it had gotten to a toxic level that made it, that's not what this is about, and that's something you don't stand by and tolerate, and he agreed with that.
How key is the stadium in the new stadium?
As far as the future or the new hire, or?
Does that fit into?
I think it's a critical piece. Peter, absolutely. I mean, the truth is we haven't had our home in 36 years. I know Tulane was part of the original, I'm sure at the time. They felt like they made, the best decisions. You have a world-class, state-of-the-art thing being done that at the time was cutting edge. But at the minute that you decided to leave your own backyard, you know, you also gave away some of that ownership and identity and the symbolism in this case, you know, that was very evident to all. As we all know, you know, the college game focuses around that game day atmosphere and activity, and that's what's alluring to young men coming up, and certainly to coaches that have to find these young men.
I know that